So this week we're talking about the literacy narrative, which is your first major assignment for this course. And to start, we're going to just take a look at what is a literacy narrative. So you have an assignment that you can look over that's very detailed about what I'm expecting in the final paper, but we have to think about what it is in general before we get down to brass tacks. So first of all, if literacy is the ability to read, write, and communicate, then a narrative about literacy is going to include all of those things. So even though this is a composition course, we read, write, and communicate in it to better develop your literacy skills. It's not one of those things. It's why most schools, K through 12, do not separate the class reading and writing. Sometimes in middle school they do, but you get all of those classes, right? And so we usually call it language arts or English in general. So this is a composition course, but I want us to start by examining what it is that you remember about your development of these skills as you've been growing up and making your way through the school system. So there's a quote here from Frederick Douglass for you to consider, and then also just a couple of questions for you to think about. And if this were a face-to-face class, we would sit and write in a journal about this, so it's up to you, but I just wish you would consider those to get your brain moving before you actually move into formal pre-writing. So the next thing, you're going to take a look at the TED Talk to get you going and think about her argument here about literacy development and how that might shape what you just thought about your own. And then just a couple of things. I mean, you've written a narrative before. It's part of the Kentucky standards if you've been in Kentucky schools your whole life. You created a story about a fictional character before. Yes, that's a narrative. It does tell a story by definition. But our narrative is going to also subtly put forth an argument about literacy. So it was really a narrative argument. It will follow a particular order, so you can go in chronological order from when you were little and you first remember you learning to read, write, and communicate, and then moving through your life, which makes very much sense to a lot of people. Or you can go in sequential order, so in order of events that were impactful. You can also go in a nonlinear manner. You could start at the end and jump through the rest of the details. It's up to you, but all of these are acceptable. It just has to follow some kind of order that makes sense. A narrative also includes narrative elements. So you're going to be doing a lot with descriptive language, which is showing, not telling. You may have heard that before. You want to use very specific anecdotes, so personal stories that contributed to your literacy development. This is not a report. It's not a 5-paragraph essay. It could be 5 paragraphs, but it's not that traditional, like, here's my thesis, here's my 3 points, and here's my conclusion. That isn't how this is structured, so don't think of it in that way. It does have a point, an argument, and that can be made explicit or implicit. Everything we write has an argument, whether we know it or not, so let's plan to include one. We'll work more on that later, but that's just something to keep in mind. Also, you want to try, if it makes sense, to include some of these narrative techniques. So you can flash back, flash forward by moving around in time, by giving examples or something that relates to your overall topic or point. And then you can also use dialogue where appropriate to really make the reader feel like they're part of your story. What is our literacy narrative? So specific to what we're doing here, you're going to tell the story of your literacy development. You will include specific stories or memories. I call those personal anecdotes. It spans time, so you're going to talk about the past, the present, and where you're headed in the future, both with this course and moving ahead. You will have detailed diction, and varied sentence structure, syntax, because that makes writing interesting. So we want to use descriptive detail here. And you can have a combination of long and short sentences, complex, compound, or simple sentences. Think about the best fiction writing. It's always going to be varied. If it were the same, it wouldn't be particularly interesting. Or it might be overwhelming if it was all really long and complicated. Think Faulkner. You might like him, might appreciate him, but I don't want to read Faulkner for this assignment. It's purposefully organized. So you have a choice, but it needs to have a purpose. So the purpose should fit whatever story you're trying to tell. and then it conveys an argument. And for our purposes, that argument is the so what. So you've told me about all this. But what does that mean? What does that mean to you now that you've reflected and looked back and you're looking forward? That is a really convenient way to share a conclusion. So this is our writing process. It's really the process you'll find in most writing workshop-based courses. Regardless of what you may have been told about college or what you may be used to in other school settings, composition courses mean there's a process involved. It's not here's your course calendar, you got a paper due next week, turn it in. No, that's not going to work. You have to turn in everything in stages. So there's no chance to wait to the last minute on the day that it's due at 11:58 p.m. and it's due 11:59. You can't, because you have to turn in the brainstorming or the pre-writing first, a draft. We're going to do a peer workshop once we shift into full class mode online. You're going to collaborate with your peers. We're going to discuss. You're going to revise and edit, and then you're going to finally turn in something that you feel is a final draft. Even beyond that, you can adjust based on my feedback. You do have the chance to publish in a more formal way, because I will enter your piece into the narrative portion of the Kentucky Council of Teachers of English Writing Contest for 2021. If you have a polished piece that you're proud of, we'll actually go through a process to determine which pieces I think are really, really have a chance to win. So if that's something you want to do, you have an opportunity to publish. And if you win, your piece will be printed, published in an academic journal. So that's an added incentive to really work hard on this piece, and others for that matter. So your next steps will be to take a look at some literacy narratives, very brief ones by professional published writers, and then to look at the assignment to think about your pre-writing process with the questions that I've included before we launch into a full draft.